2 million rubles, 15 years of isolation. One question: what is life worth? But when the time comes to pay, what would you do? Would you kill to save yourself? Welcome to Stories Narrated. I'm here to take you on a journey through the greatest stories ever written. Stories that challenge us, transform us. Stories that stay with you long after they end. Today's tale is from the master of Russian literature, Anton Chekhov. The Bet. A story about wealth, wisdom, imprisonment, and the ultimate question: what makes life worth living? This is a story that will make you question everything you thought you knew about freedom, meaning, and happiness. So settle in, close your eyes if you wish, and let me tell you about a bet that changed 2 lives forever. It was a dark autumn night. The old banker was pacing from corner to corner in his study and recalling that evening, 15 years before, when he had given a party. There had been many clever men there, and there had been interesting conversations. Among other things, they had talked of capital punishment. The majority of the guests, among whom were many journalists and intellectual men, disapproved of the death penalty. They considered this form of punishment out of date, immoral, and unsuitable for Christian states. In the opinion of some of them, the death penalty ought to be replaced everywhere by imprisonment for life. "I don't agree with you," said their host, the banker. "I have not tried either the death penalty or imprisonment for life, but if one may judge a priori, then I am of opinion that the death penalty is more moral and more humane than imprisonment for life. Capital punishment kills a man at once, but lifelong imprisonment kills him slowly. Which executioner is the more humane? He who kills you in a few minutes, or he who drags the life out of you for many years?" "Both are equally immoral," observed one of the guests, "since they both have the same object, to take away life. The state is not God. It has not the right to take away what it cannot restore." Among the guests was a young lawyer, about 25. When his opinion was asked, he said, "The death sentence and the life sentence are equally immoral, but if I were offered the choice between them, I would certainly choose the second. To live anyhow is better than not at all." A lively discussion arose. The banker, who was younger and more nervous in those days, was suddenly carried away by excitement. He struck the table with his fist and shouted at the young man, "It's not true! I'll bet you 2 million you wouldn't stay in solitary confinement for 5 years." "If you mean that in earnest," said the lawyer, "I'll take the bet, but I would stay not 5, but 15 years. 15? Done," cried the banker. "Gentlemen, I stake 2 million. "Agreed. You stake 2 million? I stake my freedom," said the lawyer. And this wild, senseless bet was carried out. The banker, spoiled and frivolous, with millions beyond his reckoning, was delighted at the bet. At supper he made fun of the lawyer and said, "Think better of it, young man, while there is still time. 2 million are nothing to me, but you are losing 3 or 4 of the best years of your life. I say 3 or 4 because you won't stay longer. Don't forget either, unhappy man, that voluntary confinement is a great deal harder to bear than compulsory. The thought that you have the right to step out in freedom at any moment will poison your whole existence in prison. I pity you." And now the banker, pacing from corner to corner, recalled all this and asked himself, "Why did I make this bet? What is the good of that man's losing 15 years of his life? What is the good of my paying 2 million? Will it prove that the death penalty is better or worse than imprisonment for life? No. All nonsense and trash. On my part, it was the caprice of a spoiled man, and on his part, simple greed for money. He recalled further what happened after the evening party. It was decided that the lawyer should spend the 15 years of his captivity under the strictest supervision in one of the banker's lodges in the garden. It was agreed that for 15 years he should not be free to cross the threshold of the lodge, to see human beings, to hear the human voice, or to receive letters and newspapers. He was allowed to have a musical instrument and books, to write letters, to drink wine, and to smoke. By the terms of the agreement, the only relations he could have with the outer world were by means of a little window made for that purpose. Through this window he could receive whatever he wanted. The agreement provided for every detail and every trifle that could make his imprisonment strictly solitary, and bound him to stay there exactly 15 years, beginning at 12 o'clock on November 14th, 1870, and ending at 12 o'clock on November 14th, 1885. The slightest attempt on his part to break the conditions, if only 2 minutes before the end, was to relieve the banker of the obligation to pay him the $2 million. During the first year of his confinement, the lawyer suffered severely from loneliness and depression, judging from his notes. The sounds of the piano were heard continually from his lodge. He refused wine and tobacco. Wine, he wrote, excites the desires, and desires are the worst foes of a prisoner. And besides, nothing is more dreary than drinking good wine alone. Tobacco spoils the air of his room. In the first year, he was sent chiefly books of a light character, novels with complicated love plots, sensational and fantastic stories. In the second year, the piano was silent in the lodge. The lawyer asked only for the classics. In the fifth year, music was heard again, and the prisoner asked for wine. Those who watched him through the window said that all that year he spent doing nothing but eating and drinking and lying on his bed. He yawned often and talked angrily to himself. He did not read books. Sometimes at night he would sit down to write. He would write for hours, and in the morning tear up what he had written. More than once he was heard crying. In the sixth year, the prisoner began zealously studying languages, philosophy, and history. He threw himself eagerly into these studies, so much so that the banker had enough to do to get him the books he ordered. In the course of 4 years, about 600 volumes were procured at his request. During this period, the banker received the following letter from his prisoner. My dear jailer, I write you these lines in 6 languages. Show them to those who know the languages. Let them read them. If they find no mistakes, I entreat you to fire a shot in the garden. That shot will show me that my efforts have not been thrown away. The geniuses of all ages and of all lands speak different languages, but the same flame burns in them all. Oh, if you knew what unearthly happiness my soul feels now from being able to understand them. The banker ordered the shot to be fired in the garden. Then, after the 10th year, the prisoner sat immovably at the table and read nothing but the gospel. It seemed strange to the banker that a man who in 4 years had mastered 600 learned volumes should waste nearly a year over one thin book easy to understand. Theology and histories of religion followed the Gospels. In the last 2 years of his confinement, the prisoner read an immense quantity of books quite indiscriminately. At one time, he was busy with natural sciences. Then he would ask for Byron or Shakespeare. There were notes in which he demanded chemistry, and a manual of medicine, and a novel, and some treatise on philosophy or theology. His reading suggested a man swimming in the sea among the wreckage of his ship and trying to save his life by greedily clutching at one spar after another.
11 to 14:30. The old banker remembered all this and thought, "Tomorrow at 12 o'clock he will regain his freedom. By our agreement I ought to pay him $2 million. If I pay, it is all over with me. I am ruined forever."
15 years before, his millions had been beyond his reckoning. Now he was afraid to ask himself which were greater, his debts or his assets. Desperate gambling on the stock exchange, risky speculation, and the recklessness which he could not get over even in advancing years had gradually brought his fortune to decline. The proud, fearless, self-confident millionaire had become an ordinary banker, trembling at every rise and fall in his investments. "Cursed bet," muttered the old man, clutching his head in despair. "Why didn't the man die? He is only 40 now. He will take my last penny from me, marry, enjoy life, gamble on the exchange, while I shall look at him with envy like a beggar, and hear from him every day the same sentence: 'I am indebted to you for the happiness of my life. Let me help you.'" The only means of being saved from bankruptcy and disgrace was the death of the man. It struck 3 o'clock. The banker listened. Everyone was asleep in the house, and nothing could be heard outside but the rustling of the chilled leaves. Trying to make no noise, he took from a safe the key of the door which had not been opened for 15 years, put on his overcoat, and went out into the garden. It was dark and cold. Rain was falling. A damp, cutting wind was rushing about the garden, howling and shaking the trees. The banker strained his eyes, but could see neither the earth, nor the white statues, nor the lodge, nor the trees. Going to the spot where the lodge stood, he called the watchman twice. No answer followed. Evidently the watchman had sought shelter from the weather and was now asleep somewhere in the kitchen or in the greenhouse. "If I had the pluck to carry out my intention," thought the old man, "suspicion would fall first upon the watchman." He felt in the darkness for the steps and the door and entered the hall of the lodge. Then he groped his way into a narrow passage and struck a match. There was not a soul there. There was a bedstead with no bedding on it, and in the corner a dark cast-iron stove. The seals on the prisoner's door were intact. When the match went out, the old man, trembling with emotion, peeped through the little window. A candle was burning dimly in the prisoner's room. He was sitting at the table. Only his back, the hair on his head, and his hands were visible. Open books lay on the table, and on 2 chairs near it, and on the carpet. 5 minutes passed, and the prisoner did not once stir. 15 years' imprisonment had taught him to sit still. The banker tapped at the window with his finger and made a slight noise. The prisoner made no movement whatever. Then the banker cautiously broke the seals on the door and put the key in the keyhole. The rusty lock gave a shriek and the door creaked. The banker expected instantly to hear footsteps and a cry of amazement. 3 minutes passed, and it was as quiet as before. He resolved to go in. At the table sat a man unlike ordinary people. He was a skeleton, with the skin drawn tight over his bones. His long hair was as white as a woman's, and his beard was long and unkempt. His face was yellow and earthy. His cheeks were hollow.
his back long and narrow, and the hand on which his shaggy head rested was so thin and delicate that it was dreadful to look at it. His hair was already streaked with gray, and seeing his emaciated, aged face, no one would have believed that he was only 40. He was asleep. On the table beside him lay a sheet of paper covered with tiny handwriting. The banker took up the sheet and read as follows: "Tomorrow at 12 o'clock I shall be free and regain the right to associate with other men. But before leaving this room and seeing the sunshine, I think it necessary to say a few words to you. With a clear conscience I tell you, as before God who beholds me, that I despise freedom and life and health and all that in your books is called the good things of the world. For 15 years I have been intently studying earthly life. It is true I have not seen the earth nor men, but in your books I have drunk fragrant wine. I have sung songs. I have hunted stags and wild boars in the forests. I have loved women, beauties as ethereal as clouds, created by the magic of your poets and geniuses, have visited me at night and whispered in my ears wonderful tales that have set my brain in a whirl. In your books I have climbed to the peaks of Elbrus and Mont Blanc, and from there have seen the sun rise, and have watched it at evening flooding the sky, the ocean, and the mountain tops with gold and crimson. I have watched from there the lightning flashing over my head and cleaving the storm clouds. I have seen green forests, fields, rivers, lakes, cities. I have heard sirens singing in the strains of shepherds' pipes. I have touched the wings of beautiful devils who flew down to me to talk of God. In your books, I have flung myself into the bottomless pit, performed miracles, slain, burned towns, preached new religions, conquered whole kingdoms. Your books have given me wisdom. All that the unresting thought of man has created in the ages is compressed into a small compass in my brain. I know that I am wiser than all of you, and I despise your books. I despise wisdom and the blessings of this world. It is all worthless and false, hollow and deceitful, like a mirage. You may be proud and wise and fine, but death will wipe you off the face of the earth as though you were no more than mice burrowing under the floor. Your posterity, your history, your immortal geniuses will burn or freeze with the earth. You have lost your reason and taken the wrong path. You have taken lies for truth and hideousness for beauty. You would marvel if, owing to strange events of some sort, frogs and lizards suddenly grew on apple and orange trees instead of fruit, or if roses began to smell like a sweating horse. So I marvel at you who exchange heaven for earth. I do not want to understand you. To prove to you in action how I despise all that you live by, I renounce the 2 million of which I once dreamed as of paradise, and which now I despise. To deprive myself of the right to the money, I shall go out from here 5 minutes before the time fixed, and so break the compact." When the banker had read this, he laid the paper on the table and kissed the strange man on the head, and went out of the lodge, weeping.
At no other time, even when he had lost heavily on the stock exchange, had he felt so great a contempt for himself. When he reached home, he lay on his bed, but his tears and emotion kept him for hours from sleeping. Next morning, the watchman ran in, pale with fright, and told him they had seen the man climb out of the window and go down into the garden and disappear through the gate. The banker went at once with the servants to the lodge and assured himself of the flight of his prisoner. To avoid arousing talk, he took from the table the paper with the renunciation, and when he got home, locked it in his safe. And so ends The Bet by Anton Chekhov. Two men, one bet, two transformations. The lawyer discovered that everything he thought mattered meant nothing. The banker discovered that everything he thought was worthless was everything. 15 years of imprisonment freed one man's mind, while 15 years of wealth imprisoned another's soul. What would you choose? Freedom with ignorance, or imprisonment with wisdom? Chekhov doesn't give us easy answers. He gives us mirrors. This is Stories Narrated, where every story is a question, and every question changes us. If this story moved you, hit that like button. Share your thoughts in the comments. What does freedom mean to you? Subscribe so you never miss a story that challenges you, transforms you, inspires you. Next time, another masterpiece, another journey, another truth. Until then, keep reflecting, keep questioning, keep listening. This was Stories Narrated.